All right. So today we're going to talk about rainforests as a very important ecosystem in Latin America, in particular in the South American basin of the Amazon. This is part of the module where we talk about water environment, module number 4. So rainforest. First, we're going to review a few concepts. I'm sure you're very familiar with this. I find out most of the students are. We're going to talk about ecosystems. First, we define an ecosystem as everything that is in a particular environment, a particular geographical place, where they share the same physical environment and the different conditions. And we have biotic and abiotic components. They interact in the environment, in the ecosystem. In fact, what we can define as an ecosystem is energy flow, an interchange of energy, interchange of nutrients. So nutrients are always in the system, as we see here, nutrients going from the soil into the living system, but also the main important component is energy, the energy from the sun. So these systems are not closed systems. They are open and they need energy, otherwise it won't work. In general, we see in the normal modern ecosystem, so the ecosystem we are more familiar with, the energy is coming through interaction with the sunlight through photosynthesis. But we see it's quite common to see other systems, other ecosystems that do use other ways to get themselves energy. Comes to mind chemosynthesis, what happens in places where the light is lacking. So, but in fact, an ecosystem can be formed by very few components. In fact, we see here an interesting toy that normally has been sold in all the stores in the United States. And we see here the biotic part is really minimal. What we see first is algae is actually taking the energy from the outside the system being defined by everything inside the glass sphere. And the algae is taking the light, producing energy, and being the algae consumed by the shrimps, and here these tiny shrimps, they are actually producing a recycling of nutrients, but it's always kept up by the energy produced by light, photosynthesis. So here we define two components, abiotic, sunlight, water, nutrients are there, and gases. Nothing really gets in or out of this system, but the sunlight is the only one. Right? All the other things are recycled. And then we do have the component produced by the living members of this ecosystem, in where we see the living part and also the dead organic matter is participating in this. This organic matter dissolves and produces nutrients that are taking over through the whole cycle several times during the life of this ecosystem. Way to define an ecosystem is by the relation between the members of this ecosystem according to what they are actually consuming, where they get the energy. So we do see first the producers, which are making the energy coming from the sun, from the light, and those producers are mostly plants through photosynthesis, and then all the others are consumers. So we see here even insects, first level consumers, second level consumers, third level consumers, and all of them are interacting with each other. So in fact, it's not really that they keep in the third level eating only the second level, but actually interacting with the whole thing and can actually be feeding themselves from plants, which is actually very first level. We do have also decomposers, which are actually decomposing the dead bodies, bacteria and fungi between the majority of them, and that is taking the nutrients back into the beginning of the system. So decomposers are very important in this equation. Now, when we go into the rainforest, we need to define what is a rainforest. It's a particular ecosystem where we have mostly an enormous amount of precipitation during the whole year in general. But there are some rainforests which actually do have a season where it's dry time. But in general, it needs to rain about 70 inches per year, even more than that. We do define various types of forests. In general, we normally refer in our imagination quickly into a tropical rainforest. It can be monsoon forest, mangrove forest, and then we have another group of forests which are the temperate forests. Temperate forests are obviously defined by a different kind of climate. And we see here temperate forests are normally below a certain latitude or above a certain latitude. We do have asymmetry in the planet defined by the different latitudes, being north or south. In general, temperate rainforests are defined by broadleaf trees or conifers. Conifers are normally much more abundant in the northern hemisphere than in the southern hemisphere, but still, we do have them in both hemispheres. The temperate zone is where they happen to be, and normally they are defined by the large amount of rain, like any rainforest should be defined. Mangrove forests are rather curious because they only live where we have brackish waters. Brackish being defined as more than zero salinity, about 1% of salinity, all the way to 35% of salinity in normal marine water. So in between is where this mangrove forest, which is a tree, fully adapted to live in those conditions. They don't live in fresh water, and they are constrained by the shallow water, where they can sink the complex root systems. So mangrove rainforests are very important too. And a third case, we have monsoon rainforest, also called dry rainforest, because they have rain only during one particular time of the year, where the monsoon happens. So they are very, very important. Normally, the trees in this monsoon rainforest are deciduous trees, meaning they are losing their leaves when the season is not favorable for them. Tropical rainforests, as the name is telling you, are close to the equatorial line. So we see rainforests more or less defined in places, defined by these lines in here. And then temperate rainforests in the south and temperate rainforests in the north. This one in here is a mangrove rainforest, so it's a particular case. In color in here we see dark green are tropical rainforest, and temperate rainforest in light green. So we see these ones in here, these ones in here, this one in the northwest, particular one, and so on. Rainforests are very old. In fact, we may consider them as the oldest living ecosystem in the planet. Some of them are being allegedly referred as being 70 million years in age, and so they happen to be from the previous era, the Mesozoic. They are very diverse, obviously, and they are complex. There are many, many species of plants, and many, many species of animals, And in between, fungi and bacteria, all these things are very diverse, and they live in these all ecosystems for several million years, as we see here. The amount of area covered by rainforest is not really much, but actually about 6% of the Earth forest, and even so, we do have a very large diversity. We see here a few numbers. Rainforests are very dense. We do find out an example here, 10 square kilometers, about 4 square miles, may contain about 1,500 different flowering plants, 700 species of trees, different species, and 4 species of birds, 400 species of birds, 150 species of butterfly. And I'm sure it's short in mentioning other things like insects, bacteria, and other things. So high diversity, very, very high diversity. We are actually abusing of the system. We are using the resources and without giving them time to recover and replenish themselves. So we are losing rainforests rather quickly. We are seeing the ecosystem being severely degraded. So rainforests are not really doing well. There are ideas to save it, ideas to manage, but things are in really frank diminishing. Rainforests in mid-latitude. So we're going to talk about rainforests. We are not always in our common conception of a rainforest. The temperate rainforests are in both hemispheres. In general, over north of 15 degrees north and 15 degrees south, and farther south and farther north. So we do see most of them are in the Pacific coast, North America, California, all the way to British Columbia into Alaska. That's one of the most common rainforests. It's a temperate rainforest, and the transition into the boreal rainforest in part, which is much less abundant in area. Now in the south we have an equivalent rainforest. It's also in the same way bordering the Pacific Ocean in the central south part of Chile and Argentina, and it's about half of the size of the North American Pacific rainforest, but still quite important. Differences, see in a moment, this particular rainforest in the south doesn't really have conifers like much of the Northwest rainforest does. So it's an interesting flora happening in the southern temperate rainforest. And we do have also related rainforest, temperate rainforest in Australia and New Zealand, and interestingly enough, these South American temperate rainforests are quite similar in composition of flora members with Australia and New Zealand, in particular with New Zealand more than anything. So we see here then temperate rainforest here, temperate rainforest here, and here. These are quite similar in the composition of the plant species. What we see here is an old rainforest with Nothofagus. That's the species. It's a particular tree that is only living in the southern hemisphere, only in Chile and Argentina, and then in New Zealand in particular. These Nothofagus are what we normally mention like a birch tree. Southern beeches, that's the name that they commonly refer. They are in fact related to Gondwana. Interesting fact is the pine family is completely absent in the southern hemisphere. We do have some conifers like cypresses from the family Cupressaceae, but still, the modern pine trees are not really native to South America. In fact, some of them are very abundant in some areas, but because we humans introduced these trees in the south. The southern hemisphere temperate forests evolve in isolation. That's the reason we have this particular set of trees in there. Same thing happened in New Zealand and parts of Australia and Tasmania. So where the thing is, well, what we see here is in the coverage before 1500s, 1550. So the rainforest, temporary forest, was essentially covering the whole area in Chile, part of Argentina, but mostly in Chile. And now what we see is a very strong confinement of the forest into the higher elevations in the Andes. So what we call the Valdivian temperate rainforest in here, marked with this blue line in here, go from 37 latitude north all the way to 43 latitude south. Sorry, latitude south, 37 south, 43 south. It's all southern hemisphere, no north. This forest is quite important. It goes over levels where we have more than 100 feet, particular defined by the flora phalersis. It's an endemic tree there, and with a lot of a particular kind of bamboo. Culio is actually called Caña Coligüe. Is very dense forest in there. These bamboos may reach about 10-15 feet. It's not really a bamboo per se. It's from the family, but it's not the typical bamboo we see in Asia. Now the Patagonian rainforest is in the central part in here. It goes from that latitude 43 south all the way to 47 south. 47 south is quite far south. It's all defined in this area here with less diversity than the Valdivian temperate forest. But it shares many of the same species. The coihue is one of the common trees. It's one of those beech trees typical from the area. And finally, the last one is the Magellanic rainforest south of 47, and the Gulf of Penas, which is about this area here. So that's the ending of it. And these trees are quite less diverse, like we see the tendency. The area is much more colder, you can tell. This is 47. About this area here is quite to 55 degrees south. So the temperature is almost Antarctic. We have two kinds, Nothofagus pumilio and Nothofagus antarctica. These two kinds are very well suited to survive in these places. So that's about it, and it's an important geographical component that we see here. The confinement of the forest is to the west of the Andes, similar to what happened in the northwest of the United States and Canada. This is an orographic rainforest. It's produced by the rain that is coming from the west winds, permanent west, and that humidity is deployed all into the west part of the Andes, and then when the winds are going over the Andes into the Patagonian section here, they are dry and cold, so essentially they are absorbing humidity instead of releasing humidity. So this area here is essentially a desert. The precipitation in these places is about 120 millimeters per year. Quite different than what we see in this other section where the rainforests are abundant. So, now going into the tropical rainforest. This is the typical rainforest we always imagine. and see in the typical rainforest we see as a characteristic, the canopy is closed. All the plants are competing fiercely for light, so they try to reach higher elevations quickly in order to take most of the radiation from the sun in order to live. The temperature is high and constant. It doesn't really have a difference between summer and winter. It's not really such a thing. It's always the same temperature. And the rainfall is always present, almost every day. Tropical forest, as we see here, marked by this general line, we can actually do here. So tropical rainforests are normally between 10 and 10 north and 10 south, elevations under 3,000 feet or 1,000 meters, more or less. If you go higher, things are changing rather quickly. As we mentioned, right here we can see three major zones. The neotropical is what we call the one in the South America, including Amazonia, all the way to Central America. Atlantic rainforest in the eastern part of central South America. Also called Atlantic rainforest, or Mata Atlantica is a Portuguese term. We do see another province of this tropical rainforest is the African rainforest. It does include Zaire Basin, West Africa, and including also Madagascar in part. It's a little further south, but it's in the eastern part of Madagascar too. The Indo-Malaysian rainforest does include west coast of India, Southeast Asia, New Guinea, and Queensland in Australia, the north part of Australia. In general, as we mentioned already, rainforests are highly diverse. All different species, from plants, animals, and even into the microbiology is really diverse. Now, in particular, about the neotropical rainforest is only in the Central and South America. Even so, the neotropical seems to suggest it's all over the world. No, it's just confined to this part of Latin America. We do see Amazonia, which is including all the Amazon basin, is including even the Orinoco basin, all the way into Central America. That's part of the Amazonia still. Now, the Atlantic rainforest is defined by this coastal environment, particularly in Brazil. It doesn't really reach Uruguay or Argentina. So it's only the Atlantic rainforest. It used to be much more extended than now, but still. So. The Atlantic rainforest, the Mata Atlantica, is in the coastal area. It's about 1,850 miles all along the Brazilian coast. And we see here in this particular map the remains of the forest by this coloring here. I'm sorry. Right. The remains of these forests are defined by this coloring here. You see, it's a rather sporadic occurrence in places like this. And the extension in the old original ecological way, it was much more extended than happened to be today. So it's rather minimal depression of these rainforests in the Atlantic. What is left, according to what used to be. the forest is really diverse, as we mentioned. This is characteristic of all the tropical rainforest. Many species of animals, so including birds, amphibians, even primates. So we have 24 different species of primates. Insects of many different kinds, obviously, and about 18,000 different flowering plants. 8,000 are unique to this environment. So these things are fragile, and changes in this can be resulting in a quick extinction, obviously, a full extinction of some species living in these places. As we mentioned, was much more extended than it is today, with an original extension of about 500,000 square miles, all the way restricted to 38,000 square miles. So quite dramatic. But the main place where we have an enormous rainforest is the Amazon rainforest. It's been defined as a place where is an incredible production of oxygen, an incredible amount of biomass, and a reservoir of carbon being locked into this ecological system. The amount of rain that rains in the Amazon basin is incredibly large, as producing one of the most important rivers in the world. We mentioned this when we talk about the Amazon basin. Do have also a very important consequence for the whole continent and for the whole planet, because it does produce changes in the climate that is affecting the whole planet. The Amazon rainforest is the largest tropical rainforest. It's the largest of all the rainforests. Is including about 2,336,000 square miles, including the Amazon and the upper Orinoco. So it's about 40% of the South American continent. It goes from 5 degrees north to 15 south, mostly Brazil, but does include some parts of Bolivia, Colombia, Ecuador, French Guiana. It does include some part of Peru, Suriname, and Venezuela too. So we do have here, in just this Amazon rainforest, 60% of all the tropical rainforests in the planet. In general, the surface is flat, with the Amazon River affecting the floodplain in a big, important way. So we do have included in the Amazon system 3 other of the 10 largest rivers in the world. So the Amazon is fed by the Madeira, the Negro, the Japura, and we mentioned also the Solimones, which is also quite important. So very important. Many small streams, lakes, abandoned sections of the river. We normally call those oxbow lakes, produced by meanders. The forest is sometimes formed by what we normally call a flooded forest. It's part of the rainforest. So the climate is defined in general by the interaction of the seasons, the interplay between the north, hardly settled, and the south, hardly settled over the continent. These things are moving with the winter, with the summer, south when we reach in December, and north when we reach about July. So this system is moving north with the summer and moving south with the summer too. So, and together with that, we move the area of major precipitation. So this is something we mentioned a few times. So precipitation in inches, 59 to 118 inches, increasing from east to west over the Amazon, more or less. The intertropical convergence zone is the responsible of this high precipitation. And we mentioned this latitudinal shift as we go with the summer in one way or in the other. The maximum precipitation happens when the winds are reaching the Andes, and on top of the intertropical convergence cell, we do see also the addition of the orographic effect. So I think we have that thing coming. Yeah. The forest itself is also producing their own precipitation, because continuously evaporation happens. And we mentioned in the previous lecture, we do have about 60% of the water that is raining in the Amazon is coming from the Amazon itself. So it goes up and rain, and it goes up and rain. About only 40% reach the mouth of the Amazon River out of the system. So it's quite an interesting situation. So we do have a lot of rain. Obviously, we do have a lot of clouds, and that is a factor keeping the temperature below 100 Fahrenheit. So in general, we see the annual temperature goes between 73 to 83 Fahrenheit. No more, no less than that. So the ranges are quite small, 14 to 18 Fahrenheit, all in all. The average for the year is about 25 Celsius or 77 Fahrenheit. Quite comfortable, but obviously quite humid. The difference during the year is no more than 4 Celsius. True rainforests are normally below 100 meters. Yeah, that's something we mentioned already. Rain. Rain is obviously the definition of a rainforest. How much rain? About 6 feet all in all during the year, all the way to 30 feet per year. That's a lot of rain. Per month, 4 inches in general. We do have a high variation here. There are dry periods, in particular when the intertropical convergence zone moves out of the area. We do see high variation in the precipitation during those months. And also we see a big effect during El Niño time. During El Niño time, we see in general the Amazon basin and the rainforest of the Amazon suffers from lack of water. Half of the precipitation, and this is again the third time I mentioned, is coming from local evaporation. As I mentioned, El Niño is producing these periods of drought in the rainforest and also fires, consequence of the lack of rain. Now, a characteristic of the tropical rainforest is that the structure of the forest happens to be very well defined. We see here, in general, levels that we call canopy. The very larger, higher part is called the emergent layer. It goes from 35 to 80 meters. You're going to have it in feet, and you have it in here, 115 to 234 feet, and that's the very top of the rainforest. And then we go into 3 more levels, overstory layer, mid-story layer, and mid-story 2. Then under the whole thing, we do see the understory layer, which is the ground level just above the soil. high competition of trees to grow over these levels in order to feed by using the sunlight. High competition. High diversity in anything. Forest structure is also defining different ecosystems depending where you are. Obviously here, see in all these places we have different creatures living in those different layers, adapted to the conditions. Now, one dramatic lack of resources in the forest, in the rainforest in particular, is nutrients. The soil is very poor. The thickness of the soil is rather minimal. It's essentially a thin layer of humus, and the minerals are leached out because all the rain. You can imagine all the rain essentially deplete all the minerals out of the easy elements and can be dissolved quickly. So in general, we do see a soil that is very rich in iron oxide or aluminum oxide, producing a poor soil. So that's one thing plants got to fight for getting nutrients. So in general, they have shallow roots because they don't need to capture much water. Nutrients are not really very available, so the search for nutrients in the forest are not really happening through the soil. So they try to adapt to those rather quickly. Some plants, and we see here, are producing an interesting strategy in order to capture tiny animals, insects in general, and then use the product of the decomposition of those animals as a feeding for the need in nutrients. So very interesting plants, and the adaptations are rather amazing, and we can see them in here. So nutrient cycling is mostly through the fall of plant material. Recycling of the nutrients happen to be quite fast, between 20 and 100 years, depending on the replacement of the plants. And we do have a high occurrence of symbiosis with fungi in the plants that are cycling nutrients rather quickly from organic matter. So many different animals. We see 150, I'm sure it's quite short, 150 different species of beetles, ants, all kinds of reptiles and birds and bats, monkeys. We just mentioned 20 different species of primates in the Amazon forest. And we do have also predators, obviously. Adaptation, we see a big number of animals are becoming nocturnal or crepuscular. We see the sloth here with an interesting coat covered by algae, giving themselves an interesting color that is easy to camouflage in their body with the green forest. So the ecological niches are defined by the elevation, top all the way up, lower than the canopy, and so on. Now this is an interesting video here. It's a long video. It takes about 11 minutes all in all. This video is a 3D, but not really 3D, 360 video. So at the same time you see it, in fact it's coming from the top of the canopy, the very top of the canopy, going down, and at the same time you can move your mouse and see around, and you can move your mouse and see up and down when the video is moving. So it's quite interesting. The recording starts about 200 feet in the top of a ceiba tree. So it gives a really nice view of what really is a rainforest, how tall it is, and all that. So The link here, you're gonna see it right away, and it's even talking about the interaction of the trees with the people that live in the region. So it's quite interesting. So we're gonna see how you enjoy it.
The forest of Amazonia connects us all. It provides clean air for the world. It gives life to me and to you. My name is Kamanya. I am born of this forest. If you don't know this place, you may see it as mysterious, filled with strange creatures. You may see it as scary, a frightening place. But we see it differently. We see it as home. We care for the forest, protect it, tend to its needs, as it tends to ours. These trees give me water when I am far from the river. I travel our rivers as you travel roads. Sharing what I know of medicinal plants and passing on the knowledge of a life in balance with nature to our grandchildren. The forest provides everything my family and my village need. It gives us food, it gives us medicine, and all that we need to build our homes. We love this way of life. You and I share this journey, and our destination is not yet decided. We can choose a different path. The forest doesn't just provide for those of us who live here. It provides for everyone. We can only save it together. It's up to us.
Well, I hope you like it. The video is an initiative showing all the things you can see in a rainforest. In fact, the tendency today is find out value in the rainforest not just by depleting the rainforest itself, but making a conscious management of the forest, selecting the trees that are going to be used. Minerals can be actually being mined with with the proper care. Oil is a little more or less in the same way, and agricultural products can be collected in the forest. In particular, you see some particular nuts and products, and we do see also a value that is not always easy to put amount of dollars. Is the medicine that we are learning from the species of plants and animals living in the forest. So still many things in the forest that we don't really know well. And then nowadays we are realizing more and more about the environmental value. A rainforest of this magnitude is essentially one of the major factors in absorbing carbon dioxide and producing oxygen. So that's a value that is an important one, and we are seeing there still is some willingness to pay to keep the rainforest the way it is in order to use these important actions. They do regulate temperature and precipitation. That's obviously important too, and not just pollinators, but anything else. We protect diversity in the planet. We do have also a cultural aspect. There are many different ethnias living in this area, so it's worth keeping the culture in a way that those things are protected in a way. We talk about 1,000 different cultures just in the Amazon basin. So what we see happening is very heavy deforestation. So people do log all the trees, in particular the most valuable trees, what we see here, exposing the soil quickly to the strong effects of this heavy rain, essentially taking all the thin soil away, and it won't really produce much for ranching. So the soil is so fragile that after the precipitation takes it away, after 1 or 2 years of being deforested, the land is almost devoid of any agricultural value. So this is something that got to be taken with a lot of precaution. We see, instead of losing a forest and gaining agricultural land, we are getting nothing, neither a forest or an agricultural land. So you got to be careful about that and manage the soil properly. We went back. What we see here, this is a dramatic graphic. Marking here what countries are clear the most forest between 1990 and 2005. This is actually quite old. You see here Brazil is really in the top. And here we do see thousands of hectares, so 440,000 thousands of hectares are being cleared for mostly for agriculture, but essentially exposing all the fragile soil to the elements. Well, you probably see we talk about a hectare here. HA is 100 meters by 100 meters. Very easy for those that use the metric system, but not really for us. We tend to use an acre. An acre is about 0.4 hectares. But still. So what we do? Well, conservation is the intention. Try to conserve the resource by national parks, by making the logging of the trees in a sustainable way, and take advantage of the product produced in the forest. And obviously, ecotourism is one of those resources. But still, we are losing a lot of rainforest area. Decreasing rate due to increased public awareness, it do have a result. So in the 1980s, we were losing about 40 million acres per year, but now we are losing about 30 million acres a year. So, you know, that's something. This is dramatic. You see, from 1990, the amount of area of rainforest is decreasing. This is stopping in 2011, I think. But you know, it's not really a good outlook. So that's all we have to say. If you look into the Brazilian forest today, this area here, going to Google Map and Google Earth, I should say, Google Earth. You go to Google Earth and they have a tool in there. You can actually choose the year of your view and can actually go back in time a few tens of years, and you see how much decrease in the amount of forest is happening. So it's a very dramatic problem, but the first way to fix it is to know about it. All right, that's all for today. Next time we're going to talk about coral reefs, a similar environment in the amount of diversity. Obviously, underwater is a whole different environment, but similar amount of diversity. All right, thank you.